You want to be honest and explain, here's what I like, here's some things we got to work on, but here's a plan. Because all of that tells them you watched me, thought about me, there's a plan for me, and that's what we need to communicate as coaches.
Yeah. And in a lot of ways, you're talking about basic human relationships. I mean, it's
always good to be a good human. Yeah.
Be a good human being. Welcome to another episode of Beyond Coaching. Got an old friend with me today, in Dan Tudor. Dan, thanks for joining me.
Yeah, longtime friend, not an old friend.
How about both, maybe?
Okay, I guess.
So you kind of saved my coaching career. I think we connected 2008 or 2009. And I was a young and dumb assistant trying to figure out how to recruit, not having a lot of success, and I stumbled onto you. So why don't you tell everybody kind of just background of what you do? It's an interesting business you got.
Yeah. So it centers around coaches, program development, college athletics, because I think college coaches have one of the most challenging jobs in the country. And I also joke that coaches aren't wired correctly. Like, why would anybody go into work, 14-hour days year round, rejection, getting fired, going to another city, starting up again. But so whatever we can do to support that, that's the mission of the organization, Tudor Collegiate Strategies. It centers around recruiting because what we find is that a lot of coaches, most coaches, have never been trained how to recruit and sell and market and tell a story and lead somebody to a decision. So what we want to do is fill that gap, where we can come in and train and teach, and also do things and construct messaging and plans and branding for them that sets them apart, makes the recruiting process go smoother. They get better recruits, they win, their job and careers improve, and life is good. So that if it all works out, that's what
it is.
Our mission is.
So how'd you end up getting into doing that? Because you were the first, to my knowledge, to focus on college athletics in particular.
Yeah. We're still really the only ones that do specifically what we do. So I'll try to speed through this for the sake of time, but right out of college, and what I went to college for was to be a TV sportscaster. And I did that, worked for an ABC station in California for about 6 or 7 years. Then went into sales. Also was coaching on the side, football at the high school level, and then also began to discover and kind of be involved loosely with recruiting services. And this is back in the 90s. So we're talking pre-internet. Things were done very differently back then. But these recruiting services, which are there today. So, bigger ones like NCSA or some of the other ones that would provide recruiting information out to colleges. There were several organizations back then that did that. And so that was fascinating to me because it kept me in the sports world, and also was starting to use this background and talent and skill set that I had been trained for on the selling side after I got out of television. When I was involved on the recruiting side, which eventually turned into owning my own recruiting service or running my own recruiting service back in the late 90s, early 2000s, one of the things that became very apparent, because we get feedback from parents as we were working with them, and one of their comments was, "Hey, everything you guys are doing is great. It's working. And I got this from coaches, but I don't know what they're saying. What am I supposed to do with this? They're not really saying anything. They're telling me a lot of information that I don't know if I'm really interested in. I want to know what it is that what they want me to do next." And it dawned on me that, wow, coaches have never been trained in the way that I had formerly been trained in a Fortune 100 sales organization, in the marketing background and communication background, how to basically connect and communicate with a prospect and a family and lead them to a decision. So that was really the genesis of the formation of the idea for the organization, the company, was to help coaches. and based on what I had observed and been through in a couple of different iterations of my professional career.
Yeah. That makes sense. That's pretty illustrative of even what we're doing on the impactful coaching project of people get into coaching and don't get trained. You know,
Absolutely.
hey, you played a sport, here's your whistle, go. And we don't train them how to teach. We don't train them on team chemistry. We don't change them how to recruit. And there's just a major gap in our industry in regards to that.
It is. And you bring that up, and I don't blame a head coach for not doing it with their assistants that they hire. I don't blame athletic directors for not doing it with their head coaches. When you get that job in college athletics, no matter what level it is, you're a veteran, new, you are immediately plopped into the meat grinder, and
Yep.
it's or the roller coaster, whichever one you want to kind of visually set for yourself, and there's no time.
Hmm.
And so what it becomes is, well, I'm going to recruit like I got recruited. How did you get recruited? Well, that coach recruited you like he or she got recruited 20 years or 30 years earlier, and so you go back, and what we discover is that people are recruiting the same way now that they did back in the mid 80s. Completely different generation, completely different communication techniques. We respond to marketing differently than we did back then. And yet, a lot of coaches, athletic departments, athletic directors approach all this in the same way, and it just doesn't work. So when we make the corrections and when we come alongside and make sure they're telling the right story, it gets a lot easier, and that's the fun part.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue. So, our impactful coaching project in this podcast, we talk about coaching the whole person, holistic coaching, and then leading Generation Z. So, born 2000 ish and on is
Right.
depending on what you read, what Gen Z is.
Mhm.
So, what I think you have some pretty unique insight into Gen Z based on the work you do. Talk about just overall thoughts on Gen Z and what you've learned in your work.
So I'll hit some highlights and we can dig into them where that
Yeah.
might suffice in answering the question. Uh, I don't think they're as every generation has the rap against them, whatever it
Hmm.
is. They're not this, they're not like our generation. So I try to be careful of that I don't get too down on a particular generation.
Right on. Totally agree.
So where I will say they are unique is they take in information. Well, first of all, they communicate constantly. So they are in constant communication. And whereas you and I might say we grew up with a phone and we were always talking on the phone, we communicated with our friends on the phone. They're doing the same thing, except they're doing it through text, which I sort of joke that that's even going back further, you know, back where we were passing notes in school.
Notes. Yeah.
This is just their version of passing notes. I hear a lot of coaches get frustrated. Well, I want to talk to them on the phone. I want to do a Zoom call with them, and they don't seem to want to do that, but they'll text me all day long. Well, it's because that's the way they're comfortable. And what we've learned about Gen Z is that they move in progressions. So at first it's texting because that's safe. Then I could add another dimension of sound and I might do a phone call with you. Once I'm comfortable with that, then I might want to do a Zoom call or say hi to you after the game that you come scout. But the coaches that show up at a school and immediately start talking about coming and visiting a campus, it goes so opposite of what this generation does in terms of getting to know and trust and feeling like, do I even want to explore this further? That's where it doesn't work. So sometimes we don't react to Gen Z effectively in terms of inserting our process and starting to push them through our process of college athletics and entering that world. We don't pay attention to the fact that they move slower.
Hmm.
They also take in information in shorter bursts. So you think about how they view social media. If it's short video, they're not going to sit and watch an 8-minute video usually on Instagram or TikTok. They'll watch 10, 15, 20 seconds and then they'll move. Well, messaging has to fit that. So instead of one big long message, whether that's a letter or an email that goes out explaining everything great about campus and our program and my history as a coach, that might need to become 4 or 5 or 6 different messages spread out slowly so that they can absorb it, think about it, and then come back to you with maybe a question. And then they get the next one and the next one. It just means changing the style to fit that Gen Z personality. The other thing is that want to know why you like them, why you want them, what their place is that's very important to them. Coaches that don't do that are going to have a hard time getting good athletes to commit. And the last thing I would say is that they want to be led. They will wait if you aren't leading them. If you aren't saying, "Here's what happens next," or "Here's what we're ready for," um, and you have some coaches, as you know, are more introverted, a little more passive in terms of I don't want to put myself out there. I don't want to ask too soon and have him say no, and then I've lost this recruit. The recruits are usually waiting for you to make the move, and they want to understand where their place is. So different than we operated as athletes, kids back in when we were growing up, but that's the way that this generation does.
Yeah. On a practical level, give me your thoughts on this. Of something I've been stuck on for about a year is I don't think a coach should give a post practice, post game talk that lasts longer than 2 minutes. I Whenever I'm out there with the team and I watch them, kids' eyes are glazed over, and often it's just for the coach to feel better if they're mad.
Yeah.
That kind of fits your short snippets thing where we need to teach on the fly, don't talk too long, move on to the next thing. Would
Right.
that be a fair correlation?
Yes, and ironically, I'll bring an example up of somebody a long time ago who was very effective at coaching and communicating, John Wooden. John Wooden, when he wanted to make a point or when he wanted to teach or say something during practice, the first thing he would do would be to say, "Rob, I really liked how you did that on that drill. And when you followed up with this, that's perfect. Here's one thing I want you to change." So, two compliments followed by an instructed. That might be something that, in a post game scenario, for the minute or so that a coach talks, "Hey, we went out, even though we lost, we did this well, this well. Um, Sam, you did great at this, really, good. Two things that we're going to work on in practice this week, this and this. But you guys stay focused, long season. We'll talk at practice." That's what this generation wants. They want, um, I can think of coaches that coached me. They were not John Wooden esque. They were yelling and threatening, and it worked. I mean, it worked on me, but we were that generation that could take that information in. And this generation is different. So you have to approach them differently for sure.
Yeah. And it's interesting. There's times to yell,
Mhm.
but for the most part, we're talking about all good things where they're essentially demanding to be treated with more respect. And I don't see that as a bad thing.
No,
Gone are the days of the Bobby Knights, so to speak, and
right,
some of the stuff
right.
we,
And I've had a
yeah,
couple of Bobby Knights that
yeah,
coached
I
me,
did
and it
too.
all worked out.
Yeah,
But instructive, the way I just described works, and that works in recruiting as well. If we're talking about an athlete, if we're trying to draw that athlete closer to us and feel connected, when you go out and watch them in a game, "Hey, love how you did this one thing I saw as a weakness. Yeah, coach, it is. Okay, well, here's how we're going to fix it when you get to my school. When our program, here's how we're going to train you to do it differently and go through some details." What does that tell this generation of this kid? It tells me you've thought about me. There's a plan for me. You're giving me individual attention. You're telling me how to get better, and I want to be led. So, boy, that is really hard to resist when it comes from a coach, as opposed to just the traditional, "Hey, you're great, and you're the best, and man, we're going to build an offense around you." And because they can sniff through that. That's
yeah,
not. They know that that's not true, and it doesn't give me anything to go off of, and it sounds like a sales pitch. And the last thing I'll say on this topic is that this is the most marketed to generation in the history of mankind. They are really sophisticated marketers, and they can smell a sales or marketing message immediately. And sometimes they're okay with that. There's a place for that in recruiting, certainly, but not when you're trying to form a relationship and connect with them. You want to be honest and explain, "Here's what I like. Here's some things we got to work on, but here's a plan." Because all of that tells them you watched me, thought about me, there's a plan for me, and that's what we need to communicate as coaches.
yeah. And in a lot of ways, you're talking about basic human relationships. I mean, it's
Always good to be a good human. Yeah.
be a good human being. There you go.
Yeah.
Um, So we're nibbling on the edges a little bit of this question,
Right.
but I'm curious to hear you dive deeper. So I imagine you've talked to coaches on almost a daily basis for 20 years now. Um,
That's why
in
my
what
voice is like this, and I apologize for a little bit of raspy voices.
Yeah. Um, in what ways have you seen coaches evolve last, let's say, 10 years? And then conversely, where are they not evolving where you just want to tell them, hey, dude, figure it out. This will make your life easier?
Well, and of course, it's not a generational thing, it's a coach by coach thing. So there are coaches that, and I'll start sort of on the not evolving side. There are coaches that would everything that we've already talked about that makes sense, or at least it sounds like it should make sense to most coaches. There are some coaches that um, are very proud. Their ego is pretty big, and to have somebody else, us, another coach, a player, a parent, whoever it is, an administrator, come in and say you need to think about doing this differently. Completely resistant to that, and to their own detriment usually. And we've worked with coaches where they they think they know it all, and even though the results aren't demonstrating that they know it all, they never change. And it strictly is like I can't let somebody know that I'm not good at something. And I mean, there's coaching personalities that is not an uncommon trait.
Yeah.
Very defensive. I don't want somebody to think I can't do this job. Um, can't can't say their name, but one of a men's basketball national championship Division I coach that we worked with and helped them and were with them when they won a national championship was so different, so unique because he did not have as much of the coaching background experience that a lot of coaches come in with. His basic attitude was, "Look, tell me what to do, I'll do it because I don't think I know these kids the way I thought I did, and so I want to know what works. What does the data say? Teach me. I'm open. I'll do it your way." And we have other coaches that sort of take that approach as well. That just say, "Hey, look, I'm an open book. You guys tell me what to do, and I'll do it." Those are the easiest coaches to work with. They win right away because I if they're not hanging on to old bad habits, then boy, it's so easy to work with them. It's so easy to insert the right approaches based on their personalities and help them win. But a lot of coaches don't because they're just too proud. And um, and also I think there's an element that when we come in and sometimes present research, sometimes it's from their own team, their own program, and kids are telling them, "Here's what you're doing wrong, coach." They're resistant because, well, I've always done it this way. So if I admit that I need to change, that means I've been doing it wrong for the last 7 or 8 years. Oh man, that's why I maybe lost that job 3 years ago. And that's, just again, there's personalities that just don't deal well with
Yeah.
that. On the plus side, I sort of gave you
Yeah.
pluses and minuses, but on the plus side, when you have a coach that says, "Hey, um, yeah, if we're in a consulting role, you're recruiting specific, that's how you help build programs. Okay, what do you know? What do you what can you tell me that might change the way I do things? And if it works and it's better, I'm going to keep doing it. I'm going to ask you for more." Before this call, I was on a call with a D1 volleyball coach out on the West Coast, and she was outlining a situation. They have an athlete that they're interested in, but she's not the best prospect. There's others that they need to go look at. How do we hold off on recruiting her, but still keep her interested because we might want her? And so we gave her that strategy but history shows that would work. And one of the advantages we have, or one of the unique aspects of what we do, is that we have 20 years now of data of what works and what doesn't. So it's not just Dan's idea versus Rob's. It's look, let's all give it up and let's follow what the kids are saying or what history tells us. So she liked that, but also we got into a new way of evaluating prospects that as we were going through some of this group of 5 prospects that they're looking at, in one of the evaluation tools that we sort of were developing with her on the fly, one of her responses to one of the comparisons or one of the readouts was, "Oh wow, whoa," because what it told her in that instance was these recruits are actually the same. So I thought this recruit was way down here, and another recruit was up here, they're actually about the same. And that surprised her, but it changes the way it is because they changed the way they evaluated. And so, um, those are the things that if you get an open minded coach who just wants to work off of data and research and a little bit of as much as you science as you could put into athletic recruiting at the college level, then it works very well. But the number one obstacle is just having a coach say, I don't know everything, and that's okay. What do I need to do differently?
So a comment and a question. The
Yeah.
comment is, so we do into the season anonymous valuations with our student athletes at Friends every year.
Mm.
And most most coaches are pretty pensive when we start them because, oh, the kid didn't play. I found kids to be 98% of them incredibly fair, and they're thoughtful. And so anybody listening, I mean, I think we can trust kids. I really do. And the few that you can't, just delete their comments and move on. Um, here's my question.
Well, on that
Yeah,
comment, let me just
yeah,
throw one thing in that you said something really key. And for anybody listening to this, they should know that anonymity is the key.
hmm
So, exit interviews that happen with seniors, hey, tell us how you liked your experience at the school. What most seniors will tell us is that I just want to get out of there. I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings. So, everything's great. Campus visit was great. Yeah, the way you recruited me was great. Loved my experience. It was good. They might offer one or two little things to improve, and then they're out. And what that unfortunately tells college programs and departments is, oh, well, we're doing
we're
it
doing
fine. The
fine.
kids
Yeah,
like it. No, the kids are sitting face to face with you in a meeting they just want to get out of and they don't want to hurt your feelings. But boy, you give them anonymity and they can say whatever they want. That's when you get good information.
yeah. And I mean, I think for people listening, thinking about it, you can even tell them of, hey, don't be a jerk, but we're going to listen to everything you say. They do it. I mean, and everybody's like, oh, it's not good. Yeah,
Right. And in the
yeah,
surveys that we do and the research we do on campuses and with programs, we always want to let the athlete know that no one's going to know you're saying it, but your coaches are going to read it. So, and sometimes the attitude is, oh, okay, finally, I'm going to tell this guy, what a jerk he is. Okay, well, if you're a jerk as a coach, expect that
yeah.
feedback. It shouldn't be a surprise.
hmm
And that might be okay. Maybe they're a jerk too. So, but the anonymity is so key. So I just want to point that out that
Yeah,
when you said that, that's why you get more accurate feedback for sure.
yeah. Right on. So here's my question. Curious when you're working with these coaches that struggle changing, is it across the board in terms of age and where they're at in their careers, or is it a specific time in their career where they're really like, I'm not gonna listen to this guy.
I mean, in general, the older the coach, the tougher it is to change them. That being said, like you asked me that question, thinking back, there have been the more dramatic changes happen when you do have that veteran experience. So you've got the operational side down, and now you finally, put the ego or the pride aside and say, I got to learn something new. It's a new generation, and they follow the techniques or the information or whatever we uncovered at their school with their athletes. Then it works really well. Usually the younger coaches know that they don't know a lot, and so they're looking at information that we would provide or that we would, work with them on as sort of it's almost like the cheat sheet where I can skip 2 or 3 years of hard knocks and doing it wrong and just jump to what's going to work. So, I mean, each group has probably the stereotypical coaches. You get some young, cocky coaches. You get some very open, older coaches that just know they need to change and learn. But just like anything in college athletics, nothing is universal. All sorts of personalities. We never assume anything when we are even just talking to a coach who has questions and just wants to talk. Not even as a client, but just as a coach. It's it. We just approach it with an open mind, and you get all kinds.
hmm Um, Want to shift gears a little bit to talk about toughness in the modern athlete and just what you're seeing there. Because because we've talked about it several times in the 25-minute conversation so far of, for the most part, gone are the days are the old school yelling coach, which I think we misinterpreted as building toughness a long time ago. Talk about with Generation Z, just in terms of coaches you see that really develop tough teams. What do you see?
I think that, well, I'll answer it this way, that I think a lot of coaches are feeling the pressure to sort of back off on that and not teach toughness because that means they're going to leave.
Mhm.
Now, again, 5, 10 years ago, leaving and switching schools was not an easy option. And that's changed now. So if you're too tough on me, or if I don't like the way you're coaching me, then I just have the ability to say, all right, I like it here, but I think I'm gonna love it over there. And so I'm gonna leave. And usually when somebody enters the transfer portal or transfers out of an NAIA school, into NCAA or to another NAIA, what they'll cite usually is either some sort of playing time discrepancy. I want to play more, and or I didn't get along with the coach, or the coach lied to me. So the relationship matters. So how do you teach toughness? I don't know if I'm the best person to answer that question, but what I would say is this: coaches need to do a better job of making the case for their entire team of why they should stay even if they aren't starting. What is it going to teach you? Because you think about, just back off the pure athletic results aspect of this for a second. We're creating an entire generation of, if you don't like it, leave. There's something better somewhere else. He doesn't treat you right, or it's a little hard there, not what you expected, just leave. That, I think, has some serious repercussions, because I think that's going to be showing up in marriage relationships, their job at the first company they get hired, or a series of companies that they work 8 months and then quit, and wash, rinse, repeat that over their whole career. Um, some of the best stories probably for any coach is when they faced a hardship and had to overcome that hardship. That could have happened in high school, could happen in college or professionally, or they had a coach who pushed them, and then they look back and say, I really, I want that coach. You have some outlier coaches that have figured it out. Certainly Gino Ariema, women's basketball coach at UConn, talks very openly about the fact that uh, they, they're going to be tough on you, and that's, tough in their own way. And, you know, but I think they do a good job of explaining, here's why you should want that. Here's how it's going to make you better. And so how do you do that? Every coach is going to have a different approach to it. But overall, I just think it starts with communication. I don't think communication is happening from coaches out to their team or to their prospects and to the prospects' parents and to their team's parents. Here's why he's got to stay. I want him here for 4 years. It's not about the playing time. It's not about a certain number of minutes or point. Don't make it about that. We want to teach him, and here's what we're going to teach him. That's
Yeah.
I hope
I
that
think
more
you're
coaches adopt that philosophy, and more athletic departments either bring in programming or examples of, like, you've got to stay, make it a home. Don't keep bouncing around, because it affects so much of your life.
yeah, thank you. Now, there are always going to be those stories of I didn't play enough, I didn't like the coach, and that's real. But I think what you're hitting on there that I totally agree with is I think most kids leave when they don't find a community within the team or at the school, or don't have a defined role. If they understand those things and feel brought into that, I think most are willing to stick it out.
Which gets back to communication.
Yep.
So we talked about, as a recruit, coach said, I did these two things well. Here's what I didn't do well, but they have a plan to make it better. As a coach, if I were to jump in and coach college athletics, I would be throughout the week touching base with players. That might be 20 seconds in practice, just coming alongside and say, hey, that thing we talked about last week, I saw you doing it out there. That's great. How are you feeling about it? Yeah, I think it's good, coach. All right, good. and build on that and communicate and always explain, look, heading into this next round of, of season, um, I don't think you're going to get more minutes, just to let you know, because we're still working on this and this. Still want you here because here's why we're going to build you up. And especially next year, here's what it's going to look like. Or you give them the feedback that you've made so much progress now, you are going to get time, because we need you because of this, this, and this that's happened. If it stays with the traditional end of the year meeting, so how'd the season go? How are you liking it? Oh, you don't like it? Well, they may have decided 4 months ago, I don't want to be here anymore. I'll come to practice. I want to get as many minutes as possible, but I'm not playing for this, for the, Coach Tudor, the jerk who never talks to me, doesn't make me feel wanted. And as we sometimes explain to frustrated coaches, players and prospects both are making decisions based on their feelings, how they feel about something, not what they think about something, but what they feel about something. And that's important to understand because it changes the way you should communicate, the frequency, the level, and as long as an athlete feels like they're being honest with me, there's a plan, he wants me, she wants me,
Mhm.
they'll usually stay. If you don't do that, if I don't feel like there's a plan and I don't know why you're sitting me and I have nothing else to go on, you're not communicating with me, coach. And the coach is maybe expecting that athlete to come into the office, knock on the door and sit down and, hey, coach, what's going on? Very rarely does that happen. The coach has to communicate. If they don't, that's when they're going to go to the transfer portal. And in some ways, I get it. I don't blame them, especially some of the higher tiered, Division One kids who may be looking at a professional career in certain sports. You better communicate.
Yep. And something I've loved, as long as we know each other and how your mind works and your stuff, is you think in systems.
Mhm.
And I think that's what this is. It's thinking in systems. A story that popped in my head as you were talking is Augie Garrido. You know that old name? He was the
Yeah.
longtime Texas baseball coach. I think he's one of the all-time leaders. And he used to talk about watching his kids play catch before games. And they had a simple system where you had to throw at the right shoulder, forehead, left shoulder. And that's how you warmed up. And they were telling him, so you focus on hitting your spots, whatever. Though that level of baseball player, as an old baseball guy, they can do it.
Yeah.
But he'd watch them, and when they weren't, he'd go walk up to them and ask them how they were doing. And the story, as it was told to me, was without fail, kids would have something going on in their lives, talk to him, and they thought coach was, just it was a Jedi type thing, and he
Right.
just knew. But it was because he
Right.
had a system that he did every day. And I think
Right.
there's so many things we can put in place to make kids feel cared for and part of the community that is manageable,
Right.
but we don't take the time to think about how it can work and put it into play day after day.
Well, and kind of to add to that, go along with what I've been saying, there's a lot of coaches that I would describe as they like this career because it lets them play coach. So I get to dress a certain way, walk around, throw my weight around, maybe do a little yelling, but I get to determine who starts, doesn't. And I just love sort of being the coach. Well, that means you're probably not focused on being the person, the communicator, the helper, the counselor, the advisor. And a lot of these kids need that.
Yep.
And if you don't give it to them, obviously you can't force a coach to do that. But if they don't give it to the athlete will go out and seek it somewhere else. And if they don't find it at that next school, now they have the mechanisms to, I'll go to another school. So if we want to stop that kind of transfer epidemic at a program before it overtakes the program and becomes just unwinnable and untenable, I have to communicate as a coach. I have to
Yep.
connect the way that you just described coaches connecting by taking a couple of seconds throughout the season, always know how my players are, whether it's my number one guy or the guy that is the red shirt that I maybe he'll develop into something as a junior. Not quite sure that, but he's on my team. So I need to develop him and
I
communicate with him.
think we're hitting the head on one of the hardest things I feel like when we're trying to hire a young coach or make a decision on to hiring a young coach is do they like the idea of being a coach or do they want to be a coach? And
Right.
those are two very different things.
Well, and also just to add to that, can they communicate effectively, not only with the athlete, but with the athlete's parents, because
Yep.
parents are involved, especially on the recruiting end. And younger kids, I mean, anytime you're a 22-year-old athlete, 24-year-old athlete coming in to your first coaching job, that's intimidating. To
Hmm.
I don't think of myself as intimidating. I don't think of you as intimidating. You probably don't either. But for that young kid to now talk to somebody, um, older than them, more experienced, that might be at a further different place professionally, that's intimidating. So they need help. They need training in how to communicate, because that's going to be the difference between success and failure in that job, which is, as we've been talking about, relies so heavily on communication.
Yep. Right on. Cool. All right. We're in a transition. We always wrap up with a rapid fire round.
Yeah.
So you got no longer than 30 seconds to answer any of these questions. And I'm gonna add one that I didn't send you, just to
But
keep you on your toes. So if you go longer than 30 seconds, I will not cut you off though. So here we go. First one. If you were to give one piece of advice for coaching the 21st century athlete, what would it be?
uh, definitely communicate, understanding that they make decisions and base value in the person they're dealing with or the program they're playing for based on their feelings. So, in your strategy of marketing or recruiting or communicating, how are you connecting to their feelings and how they feel about you, or how you want them to feel about you? That should be the center of how you market out to them.
What is the book or books you've given most as a gift and why?
I'll clarify, a gift to coaches, or the ones that I would recommend to coaches, um, are three that'll change the way you recruit. Purple Cow by Seth Godin, um, The Little Red Book of Selling by Jeffrey Gitomer, because you, as a coach, you have to sell to
Yep.
your athletic director, to the recruit. You have to sell to all of them. And then another book called Marketing Outrageously, which is written by the former promotions director or ticket director, GM of the New Jersey Nets, when the New Jersey Nets were the worst team in the NBA. And it talks about how he developed sellouts year after year with the New Jersey Nets as they were in last place. So because there's a lot of coaches that feel like I coach at a bad place, this will help you get over that hump. And it's helped a lot of coaches put a new perspective onto how they create a program.
Hmm. Well, we'll throw one more in there because you recommended it to me a long time ago, and I still give as a gift to people. Is a Winning by Clive Woodward.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of the
That's a classic.
that's a program building book.
Yeah.
Let's see. How has a failure or apparent failure set you up for later success?
Like we mentioned, like, the coaches that were hard on you in different settings. I had a high school football coach who was my high school football coach as a junior. We had a really good football team. A lot of kids went D1. I was good as a JV kid. Always started, went and played my junior year at a really, competitive program, and did not play one down. I went to every practice, did everything they asked me, didn't play one down in the season. I was the only kid on the team who didn't play it down. It ticked me off. When the season ended, I got in the weight room. I got better, worked out with the guys who were going to go to play college. The next season, I started started on offense, special teams, and and that changed me because um, I could, athletes go one way or the other. Either they're going to say, "Well, forget this, I'm off the team. He doesn't like me," or it's going to say, "I got to get better." So that's on me. I should have been better, and so that really, and I've told that coach that was a formative experience for me, unbeknownst to him. It's not like he was keeping track of me or something, but that was very, very important for me. So any degree of success or fortitude probably came from that year of just getting beat up a lot at practice and not playing at all. So it was good.
Good. What is your favorite podcast?
Well, we have our college recruiting weekly podcast, so I'm going to say that's one of my favorites.
Good.
Um, as far as another one, I'm kind of a, you know, it depends on what kind of a mood I'm in, because there are some podcasts I'll listen to that. So I'll listen to The Moth, which is actually the number one podcast in the world, is called The Moth, and it's basically storytellers.
Hmm.
People get up in these storytelling videos, they tell a story. So you really learn how to communicate and tell and tell a story. And then I'm a news junkie, so I'll listen to different news podcasts. And I mean, those are probably the ones I've been into. The there's like not true crime, but there's some really interesting podcasts that, I mean, I've already gone over 30 seconds, but there's a couple of podcasts that are just really interesting, like twists and turns. So a podcast called S Town
Yep.
is really interesting. And so I like that one. And I liked the what was it? I'm putting myself on the spot. The
Well,
Missing Richard Simmons.
I've never heard of that one. Missing
That
Richard Simmons.
Richard Simmons disappears, and two of his best friends go out and try to find him, and it takes them down a really weird, winding
It's,
road.
huh.
So that's a good one if you've got to drive. It's a 8 or 10 episode podcast, and it's really good. S
Cool.
Town is really good as well. That's fascinating and weird
Yeah.
and good.
I think that's part of the whole serial series, which I've gotten into. So just
Yeah, yeah,
great storytelling.
yeah.
Last one. In the last 5 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
Oh boy. Delegating for sure. So by nature, like most coaches, I think we're control freaks. And you reach a point where you realize you're not going to grow or improve whatever organization you're in, whether it's a company or whether it's an athletic program, by keeping a tight rein on it. And so being able to find great people, I mean, we have some great people that are a part of Tudor Collegiate Strategies, super smart, really dedicated, many of them here for a long time. So giving them more trust and giving them the ability to make decisions and help form the path forward of the company has been great. And I think that applies to coaches too. When you hire the right people and now you give them power and a say, they love their job, they stay at their job, and they want to be there, and that's huge. So that would be easily the thing that over the last 5 years I've had to train myself to do much better, and I think I'm pulling it off.
Great. Well said. Well, Dan, this has been great. I appreciate you taking the time and feel like every time we talk, I learn an awful lot from you.
Now, same here, and it's been to watch you develop from that assistant baseball coach back in 2000, whatever it was,
Yeah.
and now you're Dr. Ramsire. It's been fun to see you progress too, and love what you're doing with the podcast. So,
Yeah.
keep it up.
Appreciate it. All right. Have a great day. Thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Rob.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Beyond Coaching. Beyond Coaching is a podcast developed and produced by the Impactful Coaching Project with the support of Friends University. The Impactful Coaching Project seeks to develop coaches that coach the whole person and is the thought leader in coaching the 21st century athlete. The Impactful Coaching Project produces training, information, and research to help coaches improve. To see more information, go to impactfulcoachingproject.substack.com. Thank you.